Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. What separates happy marriages from miserable ones? Surprisingly, it's not healthy communication. It's not conflict resolution skills. It's actually the size of the marriage's joy gap, which is the length of time between moments of shared joy. When the joy gap gets bigger, problems are more likely to overwhelm you, resentment creeps in, and you start to feel distant and alone in your marriage. When the joy gap is smaller, you regularly feel connected and happy, problems feel manageable, and your marriage becomes a reliable source of joy. How do couples ensure that they experience joy regularly? Well, as we look at this new book, The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriage, you can find in each chapter 15-minute exercises that boost joy and retrain the brain to make joy the default setting. Our visit with the two authors, Marcus Warner and Chris Coursey, leads us to a conversation with Dr. Marcus Warner, a conference speaker and author who has spent over 30 years helping people and organizations navigate some of life's toughest challenges. As the president of Deeper Walk International, he has helped develop dozens of resources that deal with recovery, leadership, and family life. His co-author, Reverend Chris Coursey, is the president of Thrive Today, a nonprofit ministry focusing on training leaders and communities in the 19 skills that make relationships work. Chris is an ordained minister, pastoral counselor, published author, curriculum designer, international speaker, superhero, and he is the husband of Jen and the father of 2 young boys, Matthew and Aaron. Here to discuss the 4 habits of joy-filled marriages, how 15 minutes a day will help you stay in love, are Dr. Marcus Warner and Chris Coursey. Gentlemen, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you. To be here. Thank you very much.
Yes. You're welcome. I threw a superhero in there. It's just, I get these from your publicists, I get these bios.
Oh,
and,
yes.
Some of them are actually several pages long.
Oh, my.
And when I go down to cut them down to something that's really it's something that you can take into soundbite and say, okay, now I know what I'm talking about. Here's the premise and the theme. I almost want to say, in leaps tall buildings in a single bound is faster than a speeding bullet, because that's what their job is to build you guys up to this magnificent point. But this really is quite an interesting and almost so simple that it seems too simple to comprehend. Some things are just so basic in their logic and in their reason. It says, well, when I measure my success as a believer, it's how far I've come. And so if I measure my success as a parent, the length of time in between problems, or the potty training, the length of time in between accidents. We're really created to measure lengths of time or gaps in measuring successes and failures, relapses in addictions or things like that. How long it's been since I had a craving, how long it's been since I had a cigarette, how long we're kind of programmed that way. But when it comes to the positives, we are absolutely in no way, shape, or form prepared to evaluate life in a positive gap kind of analysis. So I found it quite extraordinary that this was the foundation, this was the hypothesis, the premise of the book, and the approach to take, which makes just so much sense. If I can just cut down on the time in between gratification, the endorphins, if I could, the Pavlov's dog, if I can just get programmed right, I can find true joy all the time at the push of a button. It seems overly simple.
It does seem a bit simple, doesn't it? But you've done an excellent job of hitting the nail on the head there. That is, I think, especially in marriage, most people look at joy as the icing on the cake. Like if I want to survive my marriage, then I want to make it a little bit better, then I want to make it a little better, and then maybe someday we'll have joy. And what we're trying to help people understand is, no, you had joy when you got married, right? You married the person because of the joy that you had with them. So what are the things that are creating a gap in the times of shared joy, and how can we shrink that gap? And the premise does kind of lay itself out fairly simply, because what I found in my marriage is, if I know that every day I'm going to be able to connect with my wife in a way where we both feel joy, there's a whole lot of stability there. If it gets to be days in between or weeks in between and sometimes months in between, there's a lot of bad stuff that can fill up that gap. And probably the two most common things that fill it up are fear and resentment. And that just creates all its own set of problems now to overcome that, shrinking the joy gap can really help.
Well, that's right. That's right. As far as your brain's concerned, joy is like oxygen to your body. We actually need joy to be who God created us to be.
This whole concept is interesting, because as I look at our journey in faith, we don't exactly do these extremes. I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you with God. We do that with our spouses. I love you, I hate you. And so the time in between the love yous and I hate yous, that's really what you're trying to expand upon till you finally get them so they're so stretched far apart that they actually both fall off the table, because they seem to represent extremes. And then you live in this river of life, which was what God is really trying to do through our relationship with Jesus. So this is really the foundational principle of what it is you're proposing, is that this relational model that God has given us is the pattern for our relational model for our spouses, because he says it's not good for the man to be alone. This is the first time he says something's not good. So let me start and take you way back, before you were married, before you were in ministry, before you two were these zealous problem solvers that gives the solution to the marital Rubik's Cube. And take me back to your faith journey as to when faith became your own, and how you began to connect the dots of relationship with God being a pattern for relationship and marriage.
Well, the irony for Marcus and I here is that we wrote a book on joy, and for me growing up, even though I grew up in church, I had no idea that joy should be a part of my walk with Christ. Joy should be a part of my church, my prayer life, my family life. Like, I had no idea joy should actually be in that mix, until I got much older and started basically counseling, working with families, and I came across a guy named Dr. Jim Wilder, who, he had basically translated all this brain science that came out in the 90s and put it into English, so to speak. And the foundational element that came out of all this brain science is that the brain needs joy to really grow and to blossom, and we need joy. And the Bible has a lot to say about joy. And so, like, when I heard this for the first time in the 90s, I thought to myself, joy? Like, what? Where was that when I was growing up? And so the irony is, even though I was raised in the church and read my Bible and prayed pretty regularly, I kind of lost some of that excitement when my teenage years arrived. So I basically drifted, became pretty rebellious up into college, until basically a couple DUIs got my attention, and I realized I'm going down the wrong road here. I need to change something. And when I prayed, I basically said, God, I don't know where you are in all this. I don't even know what you're doing, but I feel like I need to get right with you. And the irony was, when I prayed about this, I had a sense of Jesus basically saying, Chris, quit running from me. Just come here. And I actually had a sense that he was glad to be with me, and I couldn't figure out why he would be glad to be with me when I was not living a life that was really honoring him. But that changed the course of my life, and that's when I basically had an opportunity to do an internship working with hurting people. And much to my surprise, I noticed hurting people started to come alive when they had people who were glad to be with them and when they sensed God was glad to be with them. And that is joy. And joy became, as Marcus said, it's not just the icing on the cake. It's actually foundational to our identity, to our character, to who God made us to be. And I always wanted to hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," when I stand before God that day. And I thought about it one day. I thought, what would the look on his face be if he says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant"? Odds are very high he's going to have an expression of joy, glad to be with me. And that really propelled my pursuit of learning more about joy. And then I met Marcus about 10 years ago, and we became friends, and just this how God worked this whole story out to here I am now with my friend, and we wrote a book on joy, and really trying to raise the banner so people understand how important joy is. It's not only just it's a relationship, but it's also this glad to be togetherness that is just foundational to our families and our communities, and for the sake of this book, our marriages.
Chris, I want to do a little sidebar with you. You're a graduate of MBI.
Yes.
And most people don't know about the Messianic Jewish yeshiva called MBI, the Messianic Bible Institute. I, of course, as a Jewish believer, ordained Messianic rabbi, ordained Baptist minister, who took a different educational direction, working with Dr. Michael Lake and Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Brown, Dr. Michael Radelnik, just a number of others, kind of eclectically to garner all that I could possibly garner, that turned into be hundreds upon hundreds of credit hours. That was crazy. Did you find in your investigation, going back into Jewish roots and heritage, that the foundation of joy, simcha, the whole Jewish concept of joy, became something that was, it's not thematic in the Gentile world, but it is thematic in the Jewish world and rolls over into the Davidic Jewish experience of a Jewish believer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I first discovered, it was actually during an internship, I discovered a Messianic congregation in Indianapolis. And I had the opportunity to sit through a service and to hear the teaching, and the experience just opened my eyes. Like, wait a minute, why haven't I ever heard this stuff growing up in the church that I grew up in? I've never heard this stuff. And so as I started to research and dig into that, what I discovered is when you look at the feasts in the Old Testament, and you look at the richness of what God gave Israel, I mean, joy is woven through that, what he had the people do, how they worshiped, and how they celebrated the different feasts of the Lord. It was a really fascinating time for me, because as I was studying the richness of the Hebraic roots of the Christian faith, I was also learning about all this brain science. So it was a very formative time for me as I was digging into looking at these Hebraic roots of our faith and the richness there, and then looking at how God designed the brain to work. So for me, it was very compatible. It was just a very compatible experience for me to see that, wow, God really values joy, and he's created us for joy, and I should pay attention to what this is all about.
Well, being a Pentecostal, charismatic, spirit-filled Jew, I can tell you that I identify greatly with both of you. And you, Dr. Warner, Marcus, got your MDiv and your doctorate out of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, and have had your own very unique journey academically as well as spiritually. So take us on a little bit through your background.
I a little bit different than I grew up in a ministry family. My father was a Bible college president who went on to be the director of the professional doctoral programs at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. So you got a D-Min or a D-Miss degree in the 1980s, my dad was probably over that program. So my journey is a little bit different in that I was 3 years old when I prayed to receive Jesus. Right, I was knelt down next to my mom's bed and asked Jesus into my heart. What I didn't realize at the time, though, was that it was in response primarily to my fear of hell. And my exact question from my mom was, what do I have to do to make sure I never go to hell? And she's like, well, you need to ask Jesus into your heart. And I did. And I had been having nightmares at age 3 already about this, and they stopped. So I'm like, well, that worked. So that's good. Well, one of the things that happened in my journey was is that Christian has been my identity for so long. For me, it's more been a question of working out, what does real Christianity look like? What is an authentic relationship with Jesus really all about? And so my journey has been more about stripping away the obstacles, the lies that I believed, the wounds that I've had to overcome, the obstacles that have kept me from the kind of walk with God I want, which is one of the reasons why our ministry is called Deeper Walk. And the idea is to have a deeper walk with God, we often have to identify and overcome obstacles that keep us from that deeper walk. And along that path, I began to understand that my relationship with God, joy, had nothing to do with my relationship with God. It was just all duty. I was just doing what I knew I needed to do because it's what God wanted me to do. And the idea that I could have intimacy with God and that there could be joy in my walk with Him was a new idea. And it interested me, began exploring it. I also met Dr. Jim Wilder. By the way, you mentioned Michael Heiser. I've been reading some of his books recently. My studies at Trinity were in Old Testament, so I don't know if that's offensive in a Hebrew context, but it was like, but I did a lot of studying. I taught Hebrew 30 years ago at Trinity. It was one of the introductory classes. So I love the background that gave and the richness that it brought to these things. So today, I try in ministry to develop resources and tools that I need. And so one of the motivations for writing a book like this is that I need it in my marriage. You know, it's like, what is my challenge? What's my number one challenge? This helps me keep me really focused. And that is, my number one challenge here is I got to keep the joy gap between my wife and I small. And if I let it go too big, I need to recognize it and do something about that. So I tell people all the time now, I write resources because I needed them. And then I write them hoping they're going to help other people too.
Well, what you're going to find from Mike is Mike's my most favorite line from Dr. Michael Heiser is, if you read something in Scripture and it sounds weird, it's probably really important.
Yeah. I did catch that line. I've been thoroughly enjoying his different perspective on things than traditional evangelical training would lead to. So it's been interesting to interact with.
Well, I want to kind of throw this out there. There are 15 different Hebrew words and 8 Greek words to describe joy, both as a noun and a verb. In Hebrew, it can mean things like gladness, cheerfulness, calm, delight. There's so many different aspects of it. And then in the New Testament, we find it used a little bit differently. So what I think we kind of have to come to some understanding, and I came to faith at 44 out of the Orthodox synagogue into the Messianic synagogue, so I don't know anything about the quote-unquote church, Christianity, other than I'm a Jewish believer. And all the rest of that other stuff is too doctrinal for me to get involved to it, so I just stick with the biblical text, and therefore have become somewhat of a linguist and a biblicist and taking a look at these things. So anytime you have something which conceptually can be defined idiomatically in 8 to 13 different possible ways, sounds largely complicated, but rather simple when we boil it down to what it really means. So what is joy in regards to the 4 habits of a joy-filled marriage?
You and I take that one first, Chris.
Sure. So what Marcus and I talk about with joy is really joy means that we're glad to be together. So joy is a relationship. Joy is when you walk into your room and your spouse lights up to see you. You light up to see your spouse. Basically, you're the sparkle in someone else's eyes. And so that is this glad to be togetherness that Marcus and I are trying to really encourage couples to pursue, because it's when that glad to be togetherness begins to fade, that's when some unhelpful weeds start to grow in that garden.
So joy definitely, we're trying to base our definition of joy on brain science and give a brain science perspective on it. Because as you said, you can look at this word from a Hebrew perspective, a Greek perspective, an English perspective, a lot of linguistic ways. So what we've done to try to keep it focused is saying, how does the brain experience joy? And what is happening in the brain when I experience joy? And the idea that's one of the fascinating things is that the joy center of your brain is on the relational side of your brain. It's not in the left brain. So I don't think my way to joy. I relate my way to joy. And joy also kicks off endorphins and happy to see you emotions and all these, and creates bonding things. So that's what we've done. So when we're talking about joy, we're talking about a right brain bonding experience in which we're happy to be together. And I feel this, kind of you're the twinkle in my eye kind of thing.
Well, this actually resonates with our audience because we do several monthly specials here working with professionals, Dr. Timothy Jennings, who wrote The Aging Brain, The God-Shaped Brain, The God-Shaped Heart. We talk a lot about brain science with Dr. Mark Baker because we talk about a lot to do with shame, and I'm a strong believer that our sin response to things is really finding the woundedness, the place that robs our joy, which makes us realize that if Satan came to rob, kill, and destroy, what did he come to rob, kill, and destroy? Specifically, I would say that in my conversation with you, specifically, he came to rob, steal, and destroy our joy.
Right.
And if he can do that, then we become captive, and that's what Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted, the joyless, and the captives to this false gospel to set them free. So in this narrative, this is really quite clear as to what this diabolical robbing of your joy would be all about.
Yeah, because I'm most vulnerable when my joy levels are low. I mean, we wouldn't have an opioid epidemic if everybody had strong joy levels. You wouldn't have divorces if couples knew how to sustain their joy. I mean, the world would look a lot different if we actually had the joy that we're designed to have. But what happens is when those joy levels start to sink, then I'm highly motivated to pursue something else to make me feel better. So I compensate in non-relational ways often. And joy also leads to rest. So joy is actually a high energy emotion. And how well I grow joy often comes down to how well I can rest and quiet myself. So not only do we see problems with our joy levels, but we also have problems with our rest, our ability to rest and to quiet, which then if you're exhausted and it's hard to build joy, right? You actually need to rest in order to build joy. So we see the world would look a lot different if we were actually nurturing joy as God designed us to.
It's so interesting. We are about to go to break, but before we go to break, having studied very heavily Dr. Larry Crabb and Dr. John Trent, all talking about the heart shift, the change in our heart, the whole idea that in the Hebrew there's no Hebrew word for brain. In the Old Testament, in the 46,000 Hebrew words, brain's not a word. So a man thinks in his heart, believes in his heart, every inclination of a heart, out of the abundance of the heart, all these things to do with the heart, which although the endorphins are created in the brain, they're reflected in the condition of the heart. So there's this indelible connection between the autonomic system and the thought center, which biblically the thought center is the heart, not the brain. And so it's going to be very interesting when we come back, and we're going to see how we bridge the gap to be able to cause ourselves to situationally put ourselves in position that will push the button to feed, to bring that pellet of endorphins kicking out every time of that vending machine that we so desire, that's going to give us more reward, less joylessness, and more joyfulness, which is the joy of the Lord is my strength. If I can have that implicit to my marriage, then I'm going to find a new meaning and a new way to relate to my spouse. We're talking with Marcus Warner and Chris Coursey, co-authors of The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages, How 15 Minutes a Day Will Help You Stay in Love, Brain Science Hacks that Boost Your Emotional, Spiritual, and Physical Connection. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear about these brain science hacks. I love it. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of 2 Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Dr. Marcus Warner and Reverend Chris Coursey, authors of The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages, How 15 Minutes a Day Will Help You Stay in Love, brain science hacks that boost your emotional, spiritual, and physical connection. Marcus and Chris, welcome back to the program.
All right.
Thank you.
Great
to have you on here. So in the first segment, we got a little bit of your testimony, got a little bit of understanding, and we found that there was this kind of continuum that we could look at linear, that we could actually slide spaces in between, and these would be truly joy experiences, joy events. And that in the typical marriage, the span between joy events, in the early days, they're very close together, but then they began to drift, and we have only major events which slide them back towards each other, and then they continue to slip as if there was an apex to it, as opposed to a linear. And I'm trying to make this as scientific as I can because I want people to be able to envision these large events, but we seem to look at marriage as an angle. You have this pinnacle of marriage, the honeymoon period. After the honeymoon period, the joy slider just ultimately slides all the way down to where you just tolerate, you coexist, you've raised your kids, you now work your life, you're at retirement, you're now looking at this empty nester syndrome, and now what are you going to do? You decide to do stuff together, but you haven't found a way to derive joy from each other's company. So he plays golf and he goes fishing and she does crafting and she does this, and they love the retirement years, and they go to the beach 2 weeks out of every year, and they take a cruise together every year, but that's pretty much all they ever do together, and that's really not a joy-filled life, is it?
No, it's not. And we mentioned in the book that it's not uncommon to see people who've been married for 40 or 50 years, but you wouldn't really want their life. It's almost like you described, they live in separate worlds. And my world's here, and they intersect about this much. And one of the reasons that happens is that we haven't developed habits. And these habits are what keep the joy gap small. And just like anything else, if I never learned the habits necessary to play the piano, I'm not going to be able to, no matter how old I get. I never learned that habit, so I don't have it now. So what we're trying to do is identify, here's what the habits are. They're real simple. Just like the whole concept of the joy gap is simple, these habits are simple, but we have to do them. And we use the word plan to help people remember them, P-L-A-N. And that is, I want to plan for shrinking the joy gap, and it's play together. And you mentioned, so maybe after I go golf and she goes and does her crafting, we get together and we at least talk about it. We'll meet for coffee and talk about it. How was your golf? How was your crafting? We show interest in each other's hobbies. That's a part of playing together. And it's finding joy in what the other person finds joy in and celebrating that joy with them. So some of it are things that we do together. Some of it's just, being excited for the other person and what they're enjoying. And then L is listening for emotion versus listening for problems. And that is a right brain, left brain distinction. My left brain is a problem-solving machine. My right brain is a relational machine. And so most of us have a tendency to just listen with our left brain, so we just listen for problems. And as soon as we think we know what the problem is, we quit listening. And so the person doesn't feel related to, they don't feel appreciated. So we need to learn to develop the habit of listening for emotions and not just listening for problems. Then the A is appreciating daily, that every day there are expressions of appreciation. And then the last one is nurturing rhythm. And that's what Chris was talking about, the need for rest and the Hebrew idea of shalom. And the idea is that if I live with more enough shalom in my life, joy is easier. If I don't have shalom in my life, joy gets very difficult. And so that's that last idea of nurturing a rhythm that helps to create a foundation of rest and peace in my life. So there's some margin to pursue the things that build joy.
You know, when I look at Scripture and I look in, is it Micah or Amos? Can two walk together unless they be in agreement?
Right.
This agreement, this unity, behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity. That certainly applies to the marital home of unity. Unless I do these things, I don't have unity. I have disunity, which breeds dysfunction, which brings lack of shalom. And when I don't have that, then there cannot be an environment of joy. When I think of the joyous occasions in life that we look at and we assign as milestones, every one of them requires a tremendous amount of preparation. The joy of birth, the joy of a christening, dedication, baptism, bar mitzvah, marriage, graduation. We put a lot of planning into those so that they can become joy-filled occasions, and then we have these photo albums that are filled with reference points. We don't have a photo album of when Johnny broke the priceless vase. We don't have when you know, the first time that Tommy gave his sister a black eye. We don't keep that. That doesn't represent joy. We remove that from the discussion points and only point. Yeah. But does it really require that much effort, or could it very well be that if we took the same concepts and made them daily and effortless, that the milestones would be naturally occurring as an outcropping of daily and weekly and consistent joy-filled environment?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you know, we could even go back farther. If you grew up in a high joy home, then as you get older, you get married, you expect to have joy. You actually look forward to it, and you do things to grow that joy. And that's, you know, and Marcus said it well, with it being these being habits, that really that is what, you know, couples need to do. And if you practice a little bit each day, it becomes normal. It becomes your new normal. The problem is if you don't value joy, or it doesn't feel natural, then you'll do whatever it is that you do without even a thought that maybe joy should happen today with my spouse.
All right, here comes the tough questions. Now I move from being the Phil Donahue and the Pat Robertson to being the Rush Limbaugh. It's kind of the way my programs progress, from taking you to this great comfort level sitting on my couch, making you feel well nurtured. Who in the marriage is going to be the one to say, we don't have enough joy in our marriage and we need to do something about it? Who is the one that's going to begin the process of embracing daily effort? And does it require that both parties participate on an equal level and that there be mutual buy-in? Or can I subtly come across this wonderful resource and read it and say, I'm going to start doing these things? This is more along the John Trent line. I'm going to change one thing, and I'm going to do it for 30 days. I'm going to open the car door. I haven't been opening the car door since our first date, but I'm going to start opening the car door. And that's going to shift the dynamic just 2 degrees, just shift the dynamic to now it becomes, you know, the first time is, what are you doing? Or I'm having to wrestle the door out of the hand, to 30 days later it's becoming more automatic. Who's responsible for grabbing a hold of saying, I have I'm married and I have a problem. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a joyless husband. Hi,
Right.
Eric.
No, you're right. I love John Trent, and his analogy is very helpful. I think that what we're talking about here is whoever's eyes have been opened is the one who has the burden, right? It's like if my eyes have been opened, it's sort of like if whichever partner was first open to the need for Christ, right? Now it's on them. So if I have been awakened to the fact that, hey, our marriage doesn't have much joy, now I've got a choice here. I can either turn that into a weapon, and I can beat up the other person for not bringing more joy into our marriage, or I can begin to do the things that grow my own joy and help and begin to. So yeah, you could if ideally both people say, yeah, let's do this, because we're not saying you have a bad marriage. We're just saying you would like more joy than you currently have. Here's something we can do together. If you only one person is going to participate, then this book isn't going to help, because you need both people doing the 15-minute exercises for this to work.
Right.
But if that isn't the case, there are still things that you can do to build your own joy and your own capacity to live with joy in the marriage.
Yeah, and it usually is the person, the motivated one's usually the one in the discomfort, the pain, and they're motivated to do something. And a lot of people that reach out to Marcus and I often are, hey, you know what, I'm not happy with my marriage, my spouse is in his own world or her own world, what can I do? But 15 minutes a day, Marcus and I tried to keep this as simple as possible. 15 minutes a day, less time than hopefully it takes you to get ready in the morning, sit down with your spouse, do some fun little engaging exercise, build a little joy, and the proof is in the pudding. Basically, when people notice what happens when you build a little bit of joy, a little bit of joy goes a long way. And so you start to pay attention that, wow, I feel different. I notice you're smiling more. We're more connected, while something's happening here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I can feel it.
So give me an example in each one of these categories of playing together, listen for emotion, appreciate daily, nurture rhythm. You have specific things that I can do to be able to impact or have those play out.
Sure. So an example of an exercise, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Chris wrote the exercises, so I'll let him dive that.
Yeah. So, one of the things Marcus and I wanted to do with play is really play is a reflection of the joy that's in the relationship. So we really want to give opportunities to couples to do special events, develop some social routines. We even refer to relational sex as a branch on this play tree here. So basically some of the exercises are giving couples that opportunity to connect, to tell some joyful stories, to talk about highlights from their day. We do a couple of, there's some nonverbal steps to these exercises where we're sharing joy smiles. And basically we give people an opportunity to cuddle and rest. So we do a little bit of high energy joy with the story or with the eye smiles or with the outing. And then we give couples some time to cuddle and rest, because there's this wonderful hormone called oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone. Often people call it the love hormone. And what that does is it helps couples feel connected. So we do a little high energy joy, look each other in the eyes, rest together, look each other in the eyes, rest, little smiles. And then let them rest and quiet together. And we kind of wove in appreciation throughout a lot of the exercises, because it is one of the, it's part of the plan, Appreciate Daily, but appreciation is one of those things that when you just think about God's gifts, you think about what you're thankful for, you think about those special moments, those special memories, those highlights from your wedding day and so forth. What it does is it basically opens up that file for your nervous system, and your body responds as though you relive the moment all over again. So you feel that warm, fuzzy, tingly feeling in your stomach, and you notice you and your spouse are smiling, you're holding hands. those are the kinds of moments we're after, to not only remember them, but to experience them and create them in the moment, in the present. Because basically, if your joy levels are high, this is easy to do. If those joy levels are low, your brain will tend to focus on distractions, problems, pain, and the things that we don't really want to be think about will break open the door into our minds and come on in, and then we're like, wow, how do I stop that?
Is anybody too far gone? Is it ever too late to start this process? Is this something that should be done in premarital counseling? Is this something that should be done in courtship? Is this something that that the church can play an important part in raising up the next generation of husbands and wives and mothers and fathers, that if this works in a joy-filled marriage, it will also create environment for joy-filled parenting. It becomes a joy-filled kind of, I don't want to call it a program because I'm so tired of programs, but a mindset, a paradigm, a working environment, because these are the attributes of what Paul talks about. We should be spending our time thinking, whatever is good, whatever is right, whatever is noble, whatever is pure, whatever are these things we're supposed to be focusing on. Let no unwholesome talk come from your mouth, but only that which is for the encouragement and the uplifting of the other, which is to stop the whining, stop the complaining, stop the blaming. We know all about the stop this, the stop that, the don't do this, the don't do that, leave the word everything, always, and all of this stuff out. We just don't have something to replace it with, and therefore we're trapped, because the model we had, I didn't grow up in a joy-filled home. I left home right before my 15th birthday, and I've never returned, and that's 52 years that I've been gone, and never went off to prep school, went off to college, and never returned. And my mother's 93. We talk about it. We were on different planets. It wasn't even a language barrier. It was 1952, Eastern European immigrants. I was an American. Everybody else was old school. It just didn't work. And there's a lot of people today that feel isolated and alone and don't have a model of joy, because we're in this period that, although it's not the quote-unquote tribulation period, there's plenty of tribulation to go around.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the more anxiety that you're in, the harder it is to build joy. The more anger that you're in, the harder it is to build joy. When negative emotions are our natural state, and our brain kind of learns to normalize that it's just normal to be sad. It's just normal to be hopeless. It's just normal to be angry. Whatever it is we normalize in our brain, it becomes much harder to experience joy. You can't just choose to. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to choose to be happy now. It takes a relational connection to generate joy. Sometimes just remembering joy, happy relational connections can do it, and sometimes actually being with people in relational settings does that. One of the things that joy does is it grows our emotional capacity to deal with all the hard stuff. It doesn't fix all the hard stuff, but it gives us the emotional capacity to take a chance on diving into it. And so I think there's like two sides to the whole emotional recovery process, and one of them is doing the digging into the hard part and getting new truth in there and getting new things developed. And I like a lot of Timothy Jennings' materials on that, and Larry Crabb and others. But the other part of this is growing our emotional capacity. The idea is I want to return to joy when I'm done with this. I want joy to become the default setting in my brain, not something that I experience every 5 years when there's another special occasion in the family. I want joy to be the norm out of which I live. And in order for that to happen, it has to become habitual. That have to actually be habits that I learn to develop for that to become normal. The more pain your marriage is in, the harder it's going to be to do this. So are some too far gone? Probably so, in the sense that this isn't going to fix them, but in the sense that if they will add this to other things that they're doing, it can help the other things that they're doing be more effective.
Yeah, and that's where, like, if it's a husband and a wife, if the husband has other men that he can connect with in order to just get the oxygen mask on to navigate the turbulence in the marriage. If the woman can go out with her sisters and build some joy, and then let them get their oxygen mask on to navigate the turbulence. But a little joy goes a long way. But it's really hard when you're in those ruts, because when you're in those ruts, what you think will help doesn't always help. And so what Marcus and I are proposing, what actually helps is joy under the right conditions. So before we try to get through all the pain and the problems, let's actually build some joy that gives us resilience and capacity to better navigate the turbulence that we're in the midst of.
One of the statements we have in our marriage is, Brent and I will say to each other, let's keep the relationship bigger than the problem. And the idea is that we may not be able to resolve this problem today, but can we agree that we still love each other and we want to be happy to be together? And so sometimes we say this problem is bigger than we're going to solve today, but let's still be happy to be together. Let's do something that we both enjoy. And what we find is that by doing that and building more regular times for joy in there, those problems get easier to handle because I feel more bonded to the person as we deal with our problems then.
Yeah, and that's huge, what Marcus just said, because most couples just think the plane's going down and they want to jump out of it as quickly as possible.
And I can see that one spouse starting to show some interest and curiosity and appreciation and kindness and making eye contact might be a little off-putting to the one that feels a little bit disconnected and remote and is going to ask the question, what's going on? What the suspicion or the almost a deterrent saying, what's going on here? I'm noticing, why are you asking me these questions? Why are you talking to me? Why are you wanting to engage when for 7 years you've been completely silent? Haven't asked me a single thing about what I do. You don't even know that I've been promoted twice. I don't even work for the same company, and all of a sudden now you're interested in my job. I can see where we allow some of these dynamics to create an adversarial relationship where when I make the decision that we're on the same team, when I'm drawing a line in the sand and saying, look, on the ground, we're both on the same side, that is quite a gap to bridge for some people to make that leap, to realize that, wait a second, we are on the same side and we need to do something about this. I think this is a marvelous approach because it's simple, it's something that does not require an extraordinary radical change, but these are behavioral modifications, things you can do that you can be intentional about, that do not require great energy. Doesn't mean you give up your dairy. It doesn't mean you give up your carbs. Doesn't mean you give up everything. Actually, you get through curiosity, appreciation, kindness, eye contact, the ability to play together, listen to each other, appreciate each other, and really develop a new rhythm for your marriage. That's what the 4 habits of joy-filled marriage is all about. How 15 minutes a day will help you stay in love. Brain science hacks that boost your emotional, spiritual, and physical connection. 4 habits of joy-filled living. Marcus Warner, Chris Coursey, thank you for sharing this with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great to have you. God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.